Marco Rubio's life was supposed to end that night. He was expected to face death after escaping an assassination attempt into a random alley. There, he encountered a 6-year-old girl living in a cardboard box. The little girl gave him information that would save his life, but what she asked for in return shocked Rubio. This request would lead to fundamental changes in both his personal and political life. The December wind cut through Washington, D.C. like a blade, carrying with it the promise of snow and the threat of violence. Marco Rubio, the United States Secretary of State, adjusted his bulletproof vest beneath his formal diplomatic attire as he exited the Russian embassy. The meeting had gone worse than expected. Much worse. "Sir, we need to move," whispered Agent Sarah Morrison, his head of security, scanning the darkened street with practiced eyes. "Intelligence indicates potential threats tonight." Rubio nodded grimly. The classified documents he'd presented to the Russian ambassador had contained irrefutable evidence of Moscow's interference in American elections, their funding of extremist groups, and their plans to destabilize NATO. The ambassador's reaction had been predictably hostile, but the thinly veiled threats had been more direct than usual. "They know we know," Rubio murmured as they approached his armored limousine. "Yes, sir." "And they're not happy about it," Agent Morrison replied, opening the vehicle's door. As Rubio settled into the leather seat, he reviewed the evening's events in his mind. The evidence he'd gathered over 18 months was damning. Financial records, intercepted communications, and witness testimonies that would shake the foundations of international relations. Tomorrow's press conference would expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of foreign governments. But tonight, those same conspirators were clearly willing to kill to protect their secrets. The first shot shattered the rear window of the limousine, sending bulletproof glass fragments across the interior. The second shot punctured the front tire, causing the heavy vehicle to lurch violently to the right. "Contact! Contact!" Agent Morrison shouted into her radio as she drew her weapon. "Shots fired on Pennsylvania Avenue. Secretary is secure, but vehicle is compromised." Driver Agent Kevin Torres fought to control the spinning vehicle as more gunshots erupted around them. "Multiple shooters, ma'am. They've got us boxed in." Through the cracked windows, Rubio could see muzzle flashes from at least 4 different positions. Black SUVs were closing in from both directions, their occupants firing automatic weapons with military precision. "Sir, we need to abandon the vehicle," Agent Morrison decided, assessing their tactical situation. "They're trying to disable us for a close-range kill." "Where do we go?" Rubio asked, surprised by the calmness in his own voice. "Anywhere but here," Torres replied, swerving hard into a narrow side street. An explosion rocked the street ahead of them, blocking their escape route with burning debris. Another explosion behind them cut off their retreat. They were trapped in a kill box, exactly as their attackers had planned. "Radio's dead," Morrison reported. "They're jamming our communications." "How long until backup arrives?" Rubio asked. "Backup doesn't know where we are," Torres replied grimly. "We're on our own." That's when Rubio made the decision that would change everything. As the limousine skidded to a halt, he kicked open his door and rolled into the street before his security team could stop him. "Mr. Secretary," Morrison screamed, but Rubio was already running. He sprinted toward the maze of abandoned buildings and narrow alleys that characterized this forgotten section of southeast Washington. Behind him, gunfire erupted as his security team engaged the attackers, but he couldn't look back. His only chance was to disappear into the urban maze and hope that reinforcements would find Morrison and Torres alive. The sounds of battle faded as Rubio ran deeper into the labyrinth of condemned buildings and broken streetlights. His expensive Italian shoes slipped on wet pavement, his diplomatic suit torn by chain-link fences and broken glass. This was a part of Washington that most politicians never saw, the part that existed in statistics and budget reports but never in personal experience. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Rubio found himself in a dead-end alley, surrounded by the skeletal remains of buildings that had been abandoned for decades. His lungs burned from exertion, his heart pounded from adrenaline, and his hands shook from cold and fear. That's when he heard it. A small voice singing softly in the darkness. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word, Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." The voice was coming from what appeared to be a pile of cardboard boxes and plastic sheets, wedged between two brick walls. A single candle flickered inside the makeshift shelter, casting dancing shadows on the alley walls. Rubio approached carefully, his footsteps echoing off the narrow walls. "Hello? Is someone there?" The singing stopped abruptly. "Don't hurt me, mister," came a small, frightened voice. "I don't have any money." "I'm not going to hurt you," Rubio said gently, crouching down to the level of the shelter. "I'm lost, and I heard singing." "Are you okay?" A small face peered out from behind a torn piece of cardboard. A girl who couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. Her dark hair was matted with dirt and snow. Her clothes were little more than rags held together with safety pins and tape, and her eyes held a wariness that no child should ever possess. "You look fancy," she observed, taking in his expensive suit and diplomatic pin. "Are you one of the important people?" "Some people think so," Rubio replied honestly. "What's your name?" "Maya." "What's yours?" "Marco." "It's nice to meet you, Maya." Maya studied him carefully as if trying to determine whether he posed a threat. "Why are you in my alley, Mr. Marco?" "Important people don't usually come here." "I'm hiding from some bad men who want to hurt me," Rubio explained, deciding that honesty was the best approach. "Oh," Maya said matter-of-factly. "That happens a lot around here. I'm good at hiding. Do you want to come in my house?" She gestured to the cardboard shelter, which Rubio now realized was an elaborate construction of multiple boxes, plastic sheeting, and discarded materials. Despite its humble materials, it was clearly the work of someone who understood the principles of insulation, ventilation, and structural integrity. "You built this yourself?" he asked, impressed despite his circumstances. "Mama taught me before she went away," Maya replied, her voice taking on a distant quality. "She said a good house keeps you warm, dry, and safe. This one does 2 out of 3. "Which one doesn't it do?" "Safe," Maya said simply. "Nowhere's really safe when you're little and alone." Rubio felt something break inside his chest. "Maya, where are your parents?" "Mama died last winter. She got sick and couldn't afford medicine." "Daddy?" Maya shrugged. "Never met him. Mama said he was a soldier who went to fight bad guys and never came back." The casual way she described her tragic circumstances hit Rubio like a physical blow. This child was discussing parental death and abandonment with the same tone another child might use to describe their favorite television show. "Who takes care of you now?" "I take care of me," Maya said with obvious pride. "I'm very good at it. I know where to find food, how to stay warm, and which grown-ups to avoid." "Maya, have you tried going to the police or social services for help?" Maya laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Mister, when you look like me, the police don't help you. They chase you away from the warm places. And the social services people, they put kids in places that are sometimes worse than the streets." "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I talk to the other kids. There's lots of us, Mr. Marco. More than you probably think. We take care of each other, share information, warn each other about dangerous people." Rubio was stunned. "How many other children are living like this?" "In this neighborhood, maybe 20 or 30. "In the whole city?" "I don't know. Hundreds. Maybe." We're everywhere, but it's like grown-ups can't see us. The revelation hit Rubio with devastating force. As Secretary of State, he regularly reviewed humanitarian crises around the world, approving millions of dollars in aid for vulnerable children in foreign countries. Yet here, in the capital of the richest nation on earth, children were living in conditions he associated with war zones and failed states. "Maya, are you hungry?" "Always," she said simply. "But I found half a sandwich today, and Mrs. Chen at the Chinese restaurant sometimes gives me leftover rice." She reached into a small plastic bag and pulled out the sandwich half she'd mentioned, stale bread with a thin layer of mystery meat wrapped in a dirty napkin. "You can have some if you want," Maya offered, breaking the sandwich into 2 smaller pieces. "You look sad, and Mama always said sharing food makes it taste better." The gesture nearly brought tears to Rubio's eyes. This child, who had every reason to be selfish and suspicious, was offering to share her meager meal with a stranger. "That's very kind, Maya, but you need it more than I do." "Maybe," she said, taking a small bite, "but you're hiding from bad people, so you might not get to eat for a while. Mama taught me that hungry people make bad decisions." Despite everything, Rubio found himself smiling. "Your mama sounds like she was very smart." "She was the smartest person I ever knew," Maya agreed. "She spoke 3 languages, knew all about history and science, and could fix almost anything that was broken." "What happened to her?" Maya's expression grew distant. "She got pneumonia last February. We went to the hospital, but they said we needed insurance. We went to the free clinic, but they were full. We tried everything we could think of." She paused, staring at the candle flame. "She died in my arms right here in this alley. I sang to her like she used to sing to me, but it didn't help." The words hit Rubio like physical blows. A woman had died of a preventable disease in the shadow of the Capitol building, while her child watched helplessly. "Maya, I'm so sorry. That should never have happened." "But it did happen," Maya said with devastating simplicity. "And it happens to other people too. That's what I don't understand." "What don't you understand?" Maya reached into another plastic bag and pulled out a crumpled newspaper clipping. "I found this the day after Mama died. It says your government sent $50 million to help children in some country far away." Rubio recognized the article. It was about a humanitarian aid package he had personally approved for refugee children in Syria. "Don't get me wrong," Maya continued. "I'm glad those kids got help. But why are foreign children worth $50 million while my mama wasn't worth the cost of some medicine?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Rubio, who had spent years crafting foreign policy and approving international aid packages, found himself speechless. "I've been thinking about this for months," Maya said, her young voice filled with a wisdom that shouldn't exist in a child. "Why does America care more about kids thousands of miles away than kids right here?" "Maya, it's complicated." "Is it?" she interrupted. "Because it seems pretty simple to me. Either all kids matter the same, or they don't. And if they don't, then someone needs to explain why some kids are worth more than others." Rubio realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. A child who had developed a sophisticated understanding of systemic inequality through lived experience rather than academic study. "You're right," he admitted. "I don't have a good answer for that question." "Then maybe you should find one," Maya said firmly. "Because every day you don't, more kids like me lose their mamas, and more mamas like mine die when they don't have to." In the distance, Rubio could hear the sound of sirens and helicopters. His security team had apparently managed to call for backup, and a massive search was underway. "Maya, I need to ask you something important. Is there another way out of this area? The bad men who were chasing me might still be looking." Maya studied him carefully. "I can help you, but I want something in return." "Of course. Money? Food?" "I can arrange for—" "No," she interrupted. I want you to promise me 3 things. What 3 things? First, I want you to remember this conversation. Not just the sad parts, but the questions I asked you. Really remember them. I promise. Second, I want you to find out why foreign kids matter more than American kids. And if there's no good reason, I want you to do something about it. Rubio nodded, though he wasn't sure what he could realistically accomplish. And third, Maya said, her voice growing very serious, I want you to come back and tell me what you learned. Because if you're really as important as your fancy clothes suggest, then maybe you can help other kids like me. Maya, I promise all 3 things. Now, how do I get out of here? She pointed to a gap between 2 buildings that Rubio hadn't noticed. There's a tunnel that connects to the old subway system. Follow it for about 10 minutes, stay to the left when it splits, and you'll come out near the Capitol building. What about you? Will you be safe? I'm always careful, Maya said. Besides, the bad men are looking for you, not me. Nobody ever looks for kids like me. As Rubio prepared to squeeze through the narrow opening, Maya grabbed his sleeve. One more thing, Mr. Marco. When you tell people about tonight, don't make me into some kind of angel or inspiration. I'm just a kid who shouldn't have to live this way. There are lots of us, and we're all just kids who shouldn't have to live this way. Rubio looked into her eyes one final time. What's your last name, Maya? I don't have one anymore, she said simply. When you don't exist in the system, you don't need a last name. Those words echoed in Rubio's mind as he crawled through the tunnel, feeling his way in complete darkness. Behind him, he could hear voices as his security team discovered Maya's hiding place. Have you seen a man in a suit come through here? Agent Morrison's voice carried through the alley. No, ma'am, Maya replied calmly. I've been sleeping. 30 minutes later, Rubio emerged near the Capitol building, disheveled and covered in grime, but alive. FBI agents swarmed him immediately, whisking him away to a secure location for debriefing. Sir, we believe the attack was orchestrated by foreign intelligence services, Agent Patricia Williams explained, possibly related to tomorrow's press conference about Russian interference. But Rubio barely heard her. His mind was still in that cardboard box, still processing Maya's questions, still seeing the matter-of-fact way she'd described watching her mother die. Agent Williams, I need you to do something for me, Rubio said suddenly. I need a complete report on homeless children in the Washington, D.C. area. Numbers, locations, services available, gaps in coverage. Sir, that's not really a State Department issue. Make it a State Department issue, Rubio interrupted. I want that report on my desk in 48 hours. The next morning, despite the assassination attempt and his security team's protests, Rubio cancelled his press conference about Russian interference. Instead, he returned to the alley where he'd met Maya. Her cardboard shelter was gone. There was no sign she'd ever been there. He spent hours searching, asking local shopkeepers, checking with social services, but it was as if she'd vanished into thin air. The only evidence of their encounter was a small piece of cardboard with child's handwriting. Thank you for listening, Mr. Marco. Don't forget your promises. The report Agent Williams delivered 2 days later was devastating. Over 4,000 homeless children in the D.C. metropolitan area, with services reaching less than 30% of them. The document detailed inadequate funding, bureaucratic obstacles, and a system that seemed designed to fail the most vulnerable. But it was the addendum that destroyed him, a list of recent deaths among homeless youth. Jennifer Martinez, age 9, pneumonia. Marcus Thompson, age 7, hypothermia. Anna Rodriguez, age 6, traffic accident while panhandling. Maya's mother wasn't the only preventable casualty. The system was failing children every single day. That evening, Rubio called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. I want to redirect $50 million from our foreign aid budget to domestic child welfare programs, he announced. The room erupted in protests. Sir, that's not how appropriations work, said Deputy Secretary Harrison Clark. Congress allocates those funds for specific international purposes. Then we'll request emergency reallocation based on humanitarian grounds. Rubio replied firmly. Sir, homeless children, while tragic, aren't typically considered a foreign policy issue, Chief of Staff Margaret Foster pointed out. Rubio stood up, his voice rising. A nation that can't protect its own children has no moral authority to lecture others about human rights. If that's not a foreign policy issue, what is? His staff exchanged bewildered glances. Their boss had returned from the assassination attempt fundamentally changed. Furthermore, Rubio continued, I want a complete review of every foreign aid package we're currently managing. For every dollar we spend abroad on children's welfare, I want to know how much we're spending on comparable domestic programs. Sir, that's going to be incredibly complicated, warned Deputy Secretary Clark. Our foreign aid serves multiple diplomatic and strategic purposes beyond humanitarian concerns. I don't care about diplomatic purposes anymore, Rubio interrupted. A 6-year-old girl asked me why we value foreign children more than American children, and I couldn't give her an answer. Until I can, we're suspending approval of new foreign aid commitments. The silence in the room was profound. What Rubio was proposing would upend decades of foreign policy doctrine and potentially damage relationships with key allies. Sir, Foster said carefully, this could have serious repercussions for American leadership internationally. Our aid programs are essential tools of diplomacy and influence. Our credibility is damaged every time we ignore suffering at home while addressing it abroad. Rubio replied, we can't be the world's moral leader while children die in cardboard boxes 6 miles from this building. Over the following weeks, Rubio's transformation became the talk of Washington. The man who had built his career on aggressive foreign policy was suddenly obsessed with domestic issues that had nothing to do with his portfolio. He began making unscheduled visits to homeless shelters, often without security details. He testified before congressional committees about emergency funding for child welfare programs. He used his platform at international conferences to discuss America's domestic challenges alongside global issues. The secretary's having some kind of breakdown, Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Robert Mitchell complained to reporters. He's supposed to be managing our relationships with China and Russia, not conducting social work. But Rubio didn't care about the criticism. Every night he returned to that alley, hoping to find Maya and tell her he was keeping his promises. Every night he found only empty cardboard and broken glass. 3 months after the assassination attempt, Rubio was scheduled to address the United Nations General Assembly about global humanitarian cooperation. His prepared speech focused on international burden sharing and coordinated responses to refugee crises. Instead, he threw away his notes and spoke from the heart. Fellow delegates, he began, I come before you today to discuss a question that challenges everything we think we know about humanitarian responsibility. The assembly hall was packed, with representatives from 19 nations listening intently. 3 months ago, I had an encounter that fundamentally changed my understanding of moral authority and international leadership. I met a child who asked me a simple question that I believe every person in this room needs to answer. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Why do we value the lives of children differently based on where they were born? Why is a hungry child in Syria more worthy of international attention than a hungry child in Detroit? Why is a homeless child in Bangladesh more deserving of aid than a homeless child in Baltimore? Murmurs rippled through the assembly. This was not the speech anyone had expected from America's top diplomat. I met a 6-year-old girl living in a cardboard box 6 blocks from the United States Capitol. Her mother had died of pneumonia, a preventable disease, because they couldn't afford treatment. On the day of her mother's death, the American government announced $50 million in aid for children in foreign countries. The Chinese representative was furiously taking notes, no doubt preparing to use Rubio's words against future American human rights criticisms. "This isn't about nationalism or isolationism," Rubio continued. "It's about integrity. If we truly believe that every child deserves food, shelter, education, and safety, then that principle cannot have geographic limitations." He pulled out a folder containing documentation of homeless children's deaths in American cities. Jennifer Martinez died of pneumonia in Los Angeles because she couldn't access health care. Marcus Thompson froze to death in Chicago because shelters were full. Ana Rodriguez was killed by traffic in Miami while begging for food. These children were American citizens who died from preventable causes while their government spent billions helping children thousands of miles away. The hall was completely silent now. I'm not arguing that we should abandon international humanitarian efforts. I'm arguing that we should expand our definition of humanitarian responsibility to include consistency between our domestic and international values. Rubio's speech sent shockwaves through the international community. America's top diplomat had essentially admitted that his country's humanitarian efforts were hypocritical. The reaction was swift and severe. Conservative pundits accused Rubio of undermining American credibility. Liberal commentators praised his honesty but questioned his methods. International allies worried about reduced aid commitments. But something unexpected happened in the days following the speech. Stories began emerging from across America, local officials inspired by Rubio's words to address child poverty in their communities, advocacy groups receiving unprecedented donations, and most importantly, homeless children finally getting attention from media outlets that had ignored them for years. Maya's question had become a national conversation. 6 months later, Rubio received a call that changed everything. "Mr. Secretary," his assistant said, "there's a young girl here who says she knows you. She won't give her name, but she insists you'll want to see her." Rubio's heart raced as he hurried to the reception area. There, sitting in a chair that seemed to swallow her small frame, was Maya. She was clean, wearing new clothes, and her hair was neatly braided. But her eyes were the same, old beyond her years, but now filled with something that hadn't been there before: hope. "Maya," Rubio exclaimed, rushing to embrace her. "I've been looking for you everywhere." "I know," she said simply. "I've been watching you on TV. You kept your promises. Where have you been? Are you safe?" "I'm living with Mrs. Patterson now. She runs a group home, but it's different from the others. She actually cares about kids, not just government money. Some social workers saw your speech and decided to actually look for kids like me." Rubio felt tears forming in his eyes. "Maya, I owe you an apology. It took me too long to understand what you were trying to tell me." "You understood fine," Maya replied. "You just needed time to figure out what to do about it." She reached into a pocket and pulled out a small crumpled piece of paper. "I wrote something for you. Mrs. Patterson helped me with the spelling." Rubio unfolded the paper and read, "Dear Mr. Marco, thank you for remembering us. Because of you, lots of kids got help. Tommy found a real family. Sarah and her brother are together now, and I have a real bed instead of a cardboard box. But mostly thank you for making grown-ups see us. We were always here, but nobody was looking. Your friend, Maya Patterson. I have a last name now. P.S. I still think about my question. Have you found a good answer yet?" As Rubio finished reading, Maya handed him something else, the small bag of coins he remembered from that night. "What's this for?" he asked. "I was saving that money to call the president and ask him my question. But you already asked it for me." Maybe you can give it to another kid who needs to make an important phone call. Rubio looked at the coins, maybe $3 in total, and realized he was holding something more valuable than all the foreign aid budgets he'd ever managed. Maya, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to help kids like me, she said without hesitation. Mrs. Patterson says if I study hard, I can go to college and become a social worker, or a lawyer, or maybe even Secretary of State like you. I think you'd be much better at my job than I am, Rubio said honestly. Maybe, Maya agreed with a small smile. But first, I have to learn my multiplication tables. As Maya left that day, Rubio sat in his office, holding her letter and the bag of coins. On his desk was a draft of new legislation, the Maya Amendment, that would require domestic child welfare funding to be proportional to international humanitarian aid. It wasn't perfect, and it would face massive political resistance, but it was a start. It was an answer to Maya's question, even if it wasn't a complete one. 2 years later, the Maya Amendment passed Congress by a narrow margin. It wasn't everything Rubio had hoped for, but it ensured that America's commitment to children would be measured by actions at home as well as abroad. Rubio kept Maya's coins on his desk as a reminder that the most important questions often come from the most unexpected sources, and sometimes saving the world begins with seeing the child in a cardboard box right in front of you. The assassination attempt that was meant to silence Marco Rubio had instead given voice to thousands of children who had never been heard, and the 6-year-old girl who saved his life had taught him the most important lesson of his career, that moral authority isn't about what you do for others, it's about the consistency between your values and your actions. In the end, Maya was right about one thing. She was just a kid who shouldn't have to live that way. But she was also wrong about something else. She was extraordinary, not because she suffered, but because she refused to let her suffering be meaningless. The lesson Marco Rubio learned from a street child didn't just change his life or his policies. It changed how America saw itself, forcing a nation to confront the gap between its humanitarian ideals and its domestic realities. And it all began with a simple question from a 6-year-old girl in a cardboard box. Why do foreign children matter more than American children? The answer, as Maya taught him, wasn't found in policy papers or diplomatic cables. It was found in the moral courage to admit that they don't, and to do something about it.